The Valkyrie had existed before most stars were born, and they would exist long after those same stars turned to dust and scattered across the endless void of space. This was the truth that every species in the galaxy came to learn when they first reached beyond their own worlds and discovered they were not alone in the universe for 11 billion years. The Valkyrie had watched and waited and ruled from their throne at the center of everything. Their bodies were made of living crystal that pulsed with light older than time itself, and their minds held memories of galaxies that had long since faded into nothing but cold darkness. Every young species that built their first starship and ventured into the black ocean between worlds eventually encountered the same reality. The Valkyrie were the first. The Valkyrie were eternal. And the Valkyrie were to be obeyed without question or hesitation. The great council chamber of the Valkyrie floated in orbit around a dying red giant, a star they had watched ignite billions of years ago when life on most worlds had not yet crawled from the mud. Here the eldest of all beings gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance, their crystalline forms casting rainbow shadows across walls. Made of compressed starlight, Ambassador Kethferos stood among them, young by their standards at only 800 million years of age. The younger Valkyrie was considered barely more than a child, still naive enough to ask questions that older beings had long since learned to leave unspoken. Council had gathered to review the status of monitored species across the galaxy, a routine matter that had been performed countless times across the ages. World after world was discussed and catalogued, their technological progress measured and their potential threat assessed with cold precision. Then, the display shifted to show a small yellow star on the outer arm of an unremarkable spiral galaxy, and the chamber fell into a silence so complete that even the hum of ancient machinery seemed to fade away around that yellow star. A sphere of space 300 light-years in diameter had been marked with the symbols of absolute prohibition. No Valkyrie vessel had entered that zone in 40,000 years. And no explanation had ever been given to the younger races who asked about the strange gap. In the star maps, Vithvarus studied the display with growing curiosity, watching as data scrolled past showing a blue and green world teeming with life. The dominant species called themselves humans, and they had only recently begun to reach beyond their own planet into the space around them. They were young, these humans. Their entire civilization barely a blink of an eye compared to the vast ages the Valkyrie had witnessed. Yet despite their youth, despite their primitive technology and their short individual lifespans, they had been marked with the highest level of restriction the Council had ever assigned. Why do we avoid them? Kethferos finally asked, breaking the heavy silence that had fallen over the chamber. The other Valkyrie turned to stare at the young ambassador, their crystalline bodies flickering with colors that expressed shock and disapproval. Such questions were not asked, not about this matter. Not ever, but Kethferos pressed forward despite the warning looks from every elder in the room. The curiosity burning within the young ambassador was too strong to ignore, too demanding to be silenced by tradition alone. We have watched over this galaxy for 11 billion years, Kethferos continued. And in all that time, we have never hesitated to guide or correct or remove any species that posed a threat to the natural order. We have shaped the evolution of thousands of worlds and ended civilizations that grew too dangerous to allow. Yet these humans are left alone behind their wall of warning beacons, studied from a distance but never touched. The High Resonance, oldest of all Valkyrie and leader of the Council for longer than most stars had burned, finally stirred from its position at the center of the chamber. Its form was massive, a mountain of living crystal that contained a consciousness older than the galaxy itself. You ask dangerous questions, young one, the High Resonance said, its voice reverberating through the chamber like the echo of creation itself. I ask necessary questions. Kethvaros replied, surprised by its own boldness. How can we guide the younger races if we ourselves do not understand our own actions? What is it about these humans that makes the eldest afraid? The word hung in the air like poison, and several council members recoiled as if struck by a physical blow. Afraid was not a word that applied to the Valkyrie, not ever. Not in 11 billion years of absolute dominion over all they surveyed. The High Resonance was silent for a long time, its ancient mind turning over memories that stretched back to ages when the universe itself was young and hot and filled with the fire of newborn stars. Finally, after 3 full rotations of the council world below, it spoke again. They asked questions, the High Resonance said. And for the first time in millions of years, there was something in its voice that sounded almost like Kethvaros waited, knowing there was more. Sensing that the elder was preparing to share something that had been kept hidden for thousands of generations, all species asked questions. The High Resonance continued. It is the nature of intelligent life to seek understanding of the universe around them. But most species ask questions that have answers, questions about how things work and why things happen and what can be done with the knowledge they gain. And humans are different? Humans ask questions that should not be asked, the High Resonance replied, its crystalline form pulsing with troubled light. They look at the universe and see not what is there, but what is missing. They notice absences that other species overlook, gaps in the pattern that others accept without thought. The ancient being paused, and when it spoke again, its voice carried the weight of prophecy and dread combined. One day, they will ask the right question. One day, they will look at the galaxy and wonder why it is so empty. Why in all the billions of years that life has had to evolve and spread, they find only silence and ruins and a single ancient race claiming dominion over all. And when they asked that question, Kethvaros whispered. The High Resonance turned its vast attention fully upon the young ambassador, and Kethvaros felt the crushing weight of 11 billion years of existence pressing down upon its consciousness. When they ask that question, young one, they will discover the answer. And on that day, either humanity will end, or everything we have built across the ages will come crashing down around us. The council chamber fell silent once more, and on the display, the small blue world continued its slow orbit around its yellow star, utterly unaware of the ancient eyes that watched and waited and feared what was yet to come. Commander Elena Vasquez had spent her entire life looking up at the stars and wondering what secrets they held. As a child in the mountain villages of Peru, she would sneak out at night to watch the sky turn slowly above her. Dreaming of the day she might travel among those distant lights now, she stood on the bridge of the research vessel Persistent Wonder, 40 years old and commander of humanity's most advanced exploration ship. And she was about to do something that no human had ever done before. The ship had been mapping the edges of explored space for nearly 2 years, pushing further from Earth than any vessel had gone before. They were searching for signs of other intelligent life, other civilizations that might share the galaxy with humanity. What they found, instead, were the beacons. There were thousands of them, ancient machines that floated in the darkness between stars like silent guardians. They were arranged in a perfect sphere around human space, and they broadcast their warning in mathematics so old that the equations themselves seemed to belong to a different universe. Turn back, the message said when the ship's computer finally translated it. This species is under observation. Do not interact. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo stood beside Elena on the bridge, his dark eyes fixed on the display showing the nearest beacon. He was her second in command, a man who had served with her for 15 years and trusted her judgment completely. The signal is Valkyrie in origin, he said, his voice tight with concern. Commander, these are warning beacons placed by the oldest race in the galaxy. Elena nodded slowly. her mind racing through the implications of what they had discovered. Humanity had known about the Valkyrie for decades. Ever since first contact with other spacefaring species had revealed the existence of the ancient rulers, who watched over every species they had met told the same stories. The Valkyrie were billions of years old, impossibly powerful, and absolutely not to be questioned or disobeyed. They were gods in all but name, and their word was law throughout the galaxy. But now, Elena was looking at evidence that these gods had built a wall around humanity. A cage of warning beacons that told the rest of the universe to stay away from the strange species on the small blue world. "They have been watching us," Dr. Yuki Tanaka said, stepping forward with a tablet full of data in her hands. She was the ship's chief science officer, a woman whose brilliant mind had solved problems that had stumped researchers for generations. "I have been analyzing the beacon network, and based on the decay patterns of certain components, I believe they have been in place for approximately 40,000 years. 40,000 years, Elena repeated, letting the number sink in. Humanity had barely developed agriculture 40,000 years ago, had been painting on cave walls and hunting with spears made of stone. The Valkyrie had been watching them even then, had looked at those primitive humans and seen something that made them afraid enough to quarantine an entire region of space. Why? Elena asked the question that was burning in all of their minds. "We have barely left our own solar system. Our technology is nothing compared to theirs. What could possibly make them afraid of us?" Dr. Tanaka pulled up more data on the main display, showing everything humanity had learned about the Valkyrie from their alien contacts. There were records of the ancient race intervening in the development of other species, guiding some toward greater advancement while suppressing or destroying others. Entirely, every species that has ever reached spaceflight has encountered the Valkyrie, Tanaka explained. They maintain what they call the natural order of the galaxy, deciding which civilizations are allowed to grow and which must be contained or eliminated. Okonkwo added grimly, "Yes, or eliminated," Tanaka confirmed. "But humanity is unique in their records. We are the only species that has been quarantined without any direct interaction. They have never spoken to us, never visited our world, never made their presence known to our governments or our people." Elena studied the data, her tactical mind working through the puzzle. The Valkyrie were not afraid of military power, since they had crushed civilizations far more advanced than humanity without any difficulty. They were not afraid of numbers, since they had wiped out species that spanned entire galaxy arms. So what was it about humans that made them different? "They are not afraid of what we can do," Elena said slowly, the realization dawning in her mind like a sunrise. "They are afraid of what we might figure out." The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed her words. Outside the viewports, the beacon continued its ancient broadcast, warning all who approached to turn back and leave the strange species in their cage. "Commander," Okonkwo said carefully, "if we cross that line, we will be deliberately defying the oldest and most powerful beings in the known universe. I know, they could destroy us without any effort at all. They could wipe out not just this ship, but our entire species if they decided we were a threat." "I know that too," Elena turned to face her crew, seeing the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Something that burned brighter than any fear could extinguish. It was the same thing she felt in her own heart. The same drive that had pushed humanity across oceans and into the sky and beyond their own world. It was curiosity, the need to know, the refusal to accept that some questions should remain unanswered. "We have spent our entire existence asking questions," Elena said. "We have wondered about the stars since we first looked up at them. We have asked why the sun rises, and why the seasons change, and why we exist at all." She gestured toward the beacon on the display, toward the warning that had kept humanity caged for 40,000 years. Someone out there is afraid of our questions. Someone has built a wall around us because they do not want us to find the answers. And that alone tells me that those answers are worth finding. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, her eyes bright with the same fire that burned in Elena. I am with you, Commander. One by one, the other crew members voiced their agreement. Okanko was the last, and he held Elena's gaze for a long moment before finally nodding. If we are going to poke the oldest bear in the universe, he said with a slight smile, we might as well do it properly. Elena turned back to the viewport, looking out at the stars that waited beyond the line of beacons. Somewhere out there was the answer to why the Valkyrie feared humanity, and she intended to find it. Helm, she ordered, take us across. Best speed. The persistent wonder moved forward, crossing the invisible boundary that had contained humanity for 40,000 years, and behind them, the ancient beacons continued their warning to a universe that was about to change forever. The Valkyrie fleet arrived without warning. 7 massive vessels that appeared from nowhere and surrounded the persistent wonder like wolves circling a wounded deer. Each ship was a mountain of living crystal, pulsing with light that seemed to come from the heart of creation itself. Elena stood on the bridge and watched them take position, her heart pounding in her chest, but her face showing nothing but calm determination. She had known this moment would come, had prepared herself for it since the instant she gave the order to cross the beacon line. They are not firing, Okonkwo reported, confusion clear in his voice. They have weapons locked on us, but they are not firing. It was strange behavior for beings who supposedly had no tolerance for disobedience. Every story they had heard about the Valkyrie spoke of swift and terrible punishment for those who defied their commands, yet here they sat. 7 ships with enough firepower to crack planets like eggs, and they simply waited. The answer came a moment later, when a voice suddenly filled the bridge, bypassing all of their communication systems and speaking directly into the minds of every crew member. It was not sound in the traditional sense, but rather vibration, a resonance that seemed to come from the very atoms of their bodies. You will return to your world, the voice commanded, and Elena recognized it as the high resonance, the oldest and most powerful of all Valkyrie. You will forget what you have seen. Your kind must remain in the garden we have made for you. Asking only small questions with small answers, Elena forced herself to speak despite the pressure of that ancient voice pressing against her consciousness. Why have you been watching us? That is not a question you are permitted to ask. Why? Have you quarantined our space for 40,000 years? Return to your world. Human, what are you afraid we will discover? The voice fell silent, and Elena could feel something like surprise radiating from the alien ships around them. Perhaps no one had ever refused to obey before, had ever pushed back against the commands of being so old and powerful. Tanaka moved to stand beside Elena, her tablet clutched in her hands like a shield. Commander, I have been analyzing their communication method. The energy signature is unlike anything in our records, but there is something familiar about it. Familiar how? I am not certain yet. But give me time and I will figure it out. The high resonance spoke again, and this time there was something new in its voice, something that might have been hesitation. The large question must never be asked. What large question? Elena demanded. You know it already. Your species has been asking it since you first looked up at the night sky and wondered why you seemed so alone. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as understanding began to dawn. There was one question that had haunted humanity since they first understood the true scale of the universe. One puzzle that had no satisfying answer. The Fermi paradox, she whispered. Yes, the high resonance confirmed. Where is everyone, you ask? In a galaxy so old, with billions of years for life to evolve and spread, why do you find only silence and empty worlds and the ruins of civilizations long dead? Dr. Tanaka looked up from her tablet. her face pale with dawning horror. "You are the answer. You are the ancient race that everyone has been looking for. We are an answer." The high resonance corrected, and for the first time, Elena heard something in that vast voice that she had never expected to hear from a being of such power. It was fear. "We have ensured that we are the only answer." The voice continued. "For 11 billion years, we have maintained order in this galaxy. We have guided the evolution of species we deemed worthy, and we have removed those that might one day challenge our position." "Removed," Elena repeated, the word tasting like poison in her mouth. "You mean killed?" "We mean maintain the natural order." "How many?" Okonkwo asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "How many species have you destroyed?" The high resonance did not answer, but the silence spoke volumes. "In 11 billion years. With the power to travel between stars and the willingness to use force against any who threaten them, the number must be beyond counting. Every species that asked too many questions," Elena said slowly. "Every civilization that might have figured out what you really are. You killed them all before they could become a threat. We maintained order." The high resonance insisted, but the defense sounded hollow even to Elena's human ears. "And then we came along," Dr. Tanaka said, understanding flooding her voice. "And we started asking questions that no one else had thought to ask. Your kind sees patterns where others see only chaos." The high resonance admitted. "You notice what is missing as easily as you notice what is present. From the earliest days of your civilization, you have looked at the universe and asked why it does not match your expectations. The Fermi paradox," Elena said again. "We looked at the math and realized that the galaxy should be full of ancient civilizations. We asked where they all went, and you kept asking," the voice continued. "Generation after generation, you refined the question. You calculated probabilities and searched for signals and sent messages into the void hoping for answers, because we wanted to know, because you could not accept not knowing. That is what makes your species dangerous. Human. Not your weapons, not your numbers, but your absolute refusal to leave any question unanswered." Elena looked at the massive crystalline ships surrounding them, at the ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for longer than she could truly comprehend. They had the power to destroy her ship with a thought, to wipe humanity from existence before anyone on Earth even knew they were in danger, but they had not done it. "You have been planning to destroy us for 40,000 years, she said. "You have been watching and waiting for the right moment to eliminate us like you eliminated all the others. Yes, but you have not done it. Why?" The high resonance was silent for a long moment, and when it finally spoke, its voice carried a weight of uncertainty that seemed impossible for a being of such age and power. "Because we do not know what will happen when you die," it admitted. "There is something different about your species, something we have never encountered before. Your minds work in ways that confuse our oldest scholars, and your questions probe at truths that should be beyond your understanding." Elena smiled, feeling hope kindle in her chest for the first time since the alien fleet had appeared. "You are afraid of us. We are cautious. You are afraid that even killing us will not stop the questions we have asked. You are afraid that our curiosity is contagious, that it will spread to other species even after we are gone." The high resonance did not deny it, and in that silence, Elena saw the first crack in the armor of beings who had ruled unchallenged for 11 billion years. They were not gods. They were bullies who had murdered their way to the top and spent eons making sure no one else could follow, and somewhere in the hearts of these ancient creatures, a small voice was finally starting to ask if they had been right to do so. The crew of the Persistent Wonder worked through the night cycle, every scientist and technician aboard focused on a single goal. They needed to understand what the Valkyrie truly were. Needed to find the weakness hidden behind 11 billion years of absolute power. Tanaka had not slept in 30 hours. Her eyes red and tired, but her mind burning with the intensity of discovery. She had gathered every piece of data they had collected about the ancient race. Every scrap of information from their alien contacts. Every reading from the crystalline ships that still held position around them. "There is a pattern here," she muttered, mostly to herself as her fingers danced across the holographic displays. "I can see the edges of it, but I cannot quite make it fit together." Elena stood nearby, watching the Valkyrie fleet through the viewports. They had not moved in hours, had not spoken since the High Resonance admitted their fear of humanity. It was as if they were waiting for something. Though Elena could not guess what that might be, Okonkwo approached with cups of coffee for both women, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes still sharp. "The crew was getting nervous," he reported quietly. "They know we are trapped here, surrounded by ships that could destroy us in an instant." "We are not trapped," Elena replied. "We are exactly where we need to be." "And where is that?" "At the edge of the answer," she said, nodding toward Tanaka. "Yuki is close to something. I can feel it." As if summoned by her words, Tanaka suddenly straightened, her tired eyes going wide with shock and something that might have been horror. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no, that cannot be right." Elena and Okonkwo hurried to her side, looking at the data she had assembled on the main display. It showed a timeline of Valkyrie history, reconstructed from fragments, gathered across dozens of alien civilizations. "What have you found?" Elena asked. "They are not 11 billion years old," Tanaka said, her voice shaking. "I mean, they exist. They have memories that go back that far. But they did not live through those years naturally." She pulled up a series of energy readings. Complex patterns that showed strange spikes corresponding to specific moments in galactic history. Every time they destroyed a civilization, there was an energy transfer. "I thought it was just destruction at first, just the release of power from dying worlds. But it was not," Okonkwo said, understanding dawning in his voice. "No. They were feeding." Elena felt her stomach turn as she studied the data. "Explain." "The Valkyrie do not just kill species that threaten them," Tanaka said. "They consume them. Every civilization they have destroyed, every billions of beings they have murdered across the ages. They absorb something from them." She highlighted specific patterns in the energy readings. Lifespan, potential, possibility itself. The Valkyrie are parasites feeding on the futures that those species would have had. That is how they have lived so long. Elena realized. They did not evolve to be immortal. They stole their immortality from others. Worse than that, Tanaka continued. The true ancient races, the species that naturally evolved to survive for billions of years, the Valkyrie killed them first. They murdered the real elders of the galaxy and took their place. The implications crashed over Elena like a wave. The Valkyrie were not the wise guardians they claimed to be. Not the natural rulers who maintained order for the good of all. They were thieves and murderers who had built their empire on genocide. Every species they have destroyed, Okonkwo said slowly. Every civilization they have claimed was too dangerous to allow to exist. They were not protecting the galaxy from threats. They were eliminating competition, Tanaka finished. Any species that might one day become powerful enough to challenge them. Any civilization that might figure out what they really are. They killed them all and added their stolen years to their own existence. Elena turned to face the Valkyrie fleet, looking at those ancient crystalline ships with new eyes. They were not the bodies of immortal gods, but the shells of parasites bloated with stolen life. "Send this data to Earth," she ordered. "Send it to every ship in human space, to every alien civilization we have contact with. The galaxy needs to know what the Valkyrie really are, before anyone could move to obey." The voice of the High Resonance filled the bridge once more. heavy with threat and barely controlled fury. You cannot be permitted to share this knowledge, it declared. Your species asks too many questions. You see patterns where others see only silence. You solve puzzles that were meant to remain unsolved forever. Is that why you quarantined us? Elena demanded. You knew that eventually we would figure out the truth. We knew that your kind could not resist seeking answers. We knew that one day a human would look at our history and see what we have hidden for 11 billion years. Then why did you not destroy us? Okonkwo asked. You have had 40,000 years to wipe us out. Why did you wait? The high resonance was silent for a long moment. And when it spoke again, there was something new in its voice. Something that sounded almost like confusion. Because we do not know what will happen when you die. It repeated the same answer it had given before. Every species we have consumed, we absorbed their potential. Their possible futures became our fuel. Their unlived lives extended our own existence. But humans are different, Tanaka said, understanding flooding her voice. Our potential does not work the same way. Your minds are constantly active, the high resonance confirmed. You do not store possibility the way other species do. You use it immediately, turning every future into present action. Your questions become answers. Your dreams become reality. We express our potential instead of saving it, Elena said. Yes. If we try to consume your species, we will not gain your futures. Instead, we will be forced to confront every question you have ever asked. Tanaka laughed, a sound of wonder and disbelief. You cannot eat us because we would give you indigestion. We cannot consume you because your questions are dangerous, the high resonance corrected. Every query your kind has ever posed, every puzzle you have tried to solve, every mystery you have chased across the ages, all of it would flood into our consciousness at once, including the question you have been running from since the beginning, Elena said softly. The one you have killed entire civilizations to avoid. Yes, what question is that? The Valkyrie did not answer, but Tanaka did, her voice steady and certain as she spoke the words that had been building in her mind. Since she first understood the truth, what gives you the right? She asked. 11 billion years of murder and theft and lies. What gives you the right to decide who lives and who dies? The crystalline ships around them shuddered, and Elena realized that for the first time in their long existence, the Valkyrie had no answer to give. Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by her crew and faced by the most powerful beings the galaxy had ever known. The Valkyrie fleet hung in space around them. 7 mountains of living crystal that held the stolen lives of countless civilizations. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down upon her. The knowledge that everything was about to change one way or another. Either humanity would fall like so many species before them, or the galaxy would be transformed forever. Tanaka was still working at her console, pulling together the final pieces of her analysis. Commander, I think I understand why we are different. Tell me, the energy they steal from other species, it is not just lifespan. It is potential. The unlived futures and undreamed dreams of every being they consume. She pulled up a complex diagram showing the flow of energy through the Valkyrie collective. They have been feeding on possibility for 11 billion years, absorbing the futures of every species they destroyed. All those unlived lives, all those unasked questions, all those discoveries never made. They are bloated with stolen potential, Okonkwo said. Exactly. But humans are different because we do not save our potential. We spend it immediately. Tanaka turned to face Elena, her eyes bright with the fire of understanding. Every question we ask, we answer. Every problem we face, we solve or we adapt. We do not store our futures. We create them in the present moment. So if they try to consume us, Elena said slowly, they will not gain our potential. No. Instead, they will be forced to experience every question we have ever asked. All of human curiosity, all of our endless seeking, all of our refusal to accept that some things cannot be known, including the question that Tanaka asked, Okonkwo added. What gives them the right? Elena nodded, understanding flooding through her like light breaking through clouds. The Valkyrie had built their empire on a foundation of unquestioned authority, had never once been forced to justify their existence or their actions. They had killed anyone who might ask them to explain themselves, but humanity could not be killed. Not without forcing the ancient parasites to confront the very questions they had spent 11 billion years avoiding. She opened a communication channel, not just to the Valkyrie fleet, but to every ship and station and world that might be listening. She wanted the entire galaxy to hear what was about to happen. High resonance, she said, her voice calm and steady despite the fear that still flickered in her heart. You have killed trillions. You have devoured the futures of countless civilizations. You have spent 11 billion years pretending to be gods. You speak of things you do not understand, the ancient voice replied. But there was something new in its tone, something that sounded almost like desperation. I understand perfectly, Elena said. You are not the oldest race in the galaxy. You are not the natural rulers. You are not the wise guardians maintaining order for the good of all. She stepped forward, facing the viewports and the massive crystalline ships beyond. You are thieves who murdered your way to power and have been running from the truth ever since. Silence. The high resonance commanded, but the word had lost its force. The being who spoke it no longer believed in its own authority. In all the time you have existed, Elena continued. In all the billions of years you have claimed dominion over this galaxy. You have never once asked yourselves the question that every human child learns to ask. The Valkyrie ships began to move, their weapons charging with light that should have terrified her. But Elena did not flinch, did not step back, did not show any sign of fear. Stop, the high resonance demanded. You do not know what you are doing. I know exactly what I am doing, Elena replied. I am asking you a question. She drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of human history behind her. All the generations of curious minds who had looked at the universe and refused to accept that some things were unknowable, and then she spoke a single word, pouring into it all the power of human curiosity, all the force of a species that had never stopped asking and seeking and wondering. Why? The word rippled outward from the persistent wonder, not as sound but as something deeper, a question that demanded an answer. It struck the nearest Valkyrie ship and passed through it, touching the ancient consciousness within, and the high resonance screamed. The sound was terrible, a cry of agony that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The great crystalline body began to crack, fissures spreading across its surface like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Why did you kill them? Elena pressed. Why did you steal their lives and their futures? Why did you silence every voice that might question your rule? More cracks appeared, and light began to pour from the wounds. Light that was not the cold glow of Valkyrie power, but something warmer. Something that had been imprisoned for billions of years. Why do you deserve to live when you have murdered so many? The high resonance thrashed in its agony, its vast form coming apart as the questions tore through its consciousness. 11 billion years of avoiding this moment. And now it had no choice but to face the truth. It had no answer, it had never had an answer, and had simply killed anyone who might ask the question. I see them, Dr. Tanaka whispered, staring at her instruments with tears streaming down her face. Commander, the energy the Valkyrie stole, it is being released. All those civilizations, all those possibilities they consumed, they are returning outside the viewports. The Valkyrie ships were crumbling, their crystalline bodies dissolving into streams of light that scattered across the stars. And where that light touched the void, something began to change. What is happening? Okonkwo asked. The species they consumed did not truly die, Tanaka explained. Their potential was imprisoned, locked away inside the Volcari collective. But now it is free again. Alina watched as the light spread across the galaxy, seeding the darkness with possibility. Somewhere out there, on worlds that had been empty for billions of years, evolution would begin again. The true ancient races would have another chance. The Volcari are not dying, she realized. They are diminishing. The stolen years are bleeding away, and without them, they are just ordinary beings. The high resonance, or what remained of it, spoke one final time, its voice weak and fading. What have you done? I asked a question, Elena replied simply. And you finally had to answer it. The last of the great crystalline ships dissolved into light. And the space around the persistent wonder was suddenly empty and quiet and full of stars. Elena turned to her crew, seeing the awe and hope in their faces. Send a message to Earth, she ordered. Tell them the cage is open. Tell them the galaxy is free. What about us? Okonkwo asked. What do we do now? Elena smiled, looking out at the universe that suddenly seemed so much larger and more wonderful than it had before. We do what humans have always done, she said. We explore, we learn. We ask questions. And we never stop being amazed by the answers. Far away, on a small blue world orbiting a yellow star, humanity looked up at the night sky and felt something change. The weight of ancient eyes that had watched them for 40,000 years was suddenly gone. And in its place was something new: freedom, possibility, the chance to finally reach for the stars without fear and across the galaxy. In the spaces between worlds, new life was stirring. Old civilizations waking from a long sleep. Ancient voices rising to speak for the first time in billions of years. The universe was full of questions again. And thanks to humanity, it would never stop asking them.